Great. Well, thanks everyone for coming. And welcome to Music as a Stealth Teaching Tool. So you might think that I'm teaching this session, but we're all actually doing it together, really. I have some ideas. I've thought about this, and I bet that you have actually been doing some of this work already, and we can learn from each other. So I just want to start with a familiar melody. I thought I would do something seasonal, so I'm going to do it two different ways. And you're welcome to join me. If you're on mute, it doesn't matter, then you don't need to worry about the sound quality. Yai-dai, yai-dai-dai, yai-dai-dai-dai-dai, yai-dai-dai-dai, yai-dai-dai-dai-dai. Sorry, I'm not in my best voice right now. Fighting off a little something that my whole family has. So, same melody. What can you tell me about the first version that it was evoking in you? Robbie, can you unmute people so they can speak?
They can also unmute themselves.
Okay, or they can unmute themselves.
So my response is that the first one was kind of sad and kind of like funeral-esque, just kind of evocative, but very emotional and very kind of sad.
Others?
I found it very peaceful.
Anything else?
I would say somber.
Comforting.
So no matter what my intention was, obviously I was conveying different things to different people, which is a good lesson in and of itself. What about the second one?
Familiar. In Hameitzar was easily recognizable, upbeat, fun, Hallel, tune.
It was the same tune, though.
Right, but the second time it evoked that festive Hallel spirit that it was written for.
A lot of the heads started sort of bopping and people were moving when you started that second one. So it was interesting to see how everybody sort of responded to it.
Yeah, whereas in the first one, I saw people closing their eyes. It's different. Yeah, so sometimes what we're conveying is going far beyond, just the text and the melody. And really when I came up with this session, I was thinking of like some ways that I do that on purpose, and how I could enhance my own awareness of doing that, and again, help us all learn from each other. So there, that's part of what I want to do in this hour is like, share some of the things that I've developed that are specific techniques, and have you share your specific techniques, but also to help us all together enhance our awareness of how what we can do can convey different levels of learning. So, I mean, let's start with some, and I'm going to, let's see, I'm going to share my screen. I've started a new document, and on it, I'll put up everything that comes up as a suggestion, and then that will be available to everyone to have along with the recording of the session. So some of the things that I think of as music that it's maybe not so stealthy music as a teaching tool are things like, Debbie Friedman of blessed memory, the Aleph Bet song has like educated generations of Hebrew school students. And, sometimes, if you're working with students, they'll be like thinking to themselves, Aleph Bet, what was that letter? And they'll actually use the song to find it. And, just some of the fun settings of Hebrew songs that we use with our congregations and our religious schools. And of course, just plain old repetition. Anyone want to add anything just very basic to that list that you think isn't so stealthy, but I can't actually see everybody if I'm sharing my screen, so I'm going to have to unshare.
I know that we use music an awful lot to try to bring people into community, without necessarily stating that, but just by starting a service with singing, or by starting a teaching session or a rehearsal with singing. It's a way of bringing the community together.
Mm-hmm. With somebody else?
I was just going to say, I think it's really important. You're preaching to the choir directors here as you're singing. It's all right. But and it's a melody that I think many of us know and cherish. Repetition of the singing, not just singing it, but repetitive singing. As they say, you hear something 3 times and you start to get it. So just, even though it's really hard to do that because you feel like you're up there and everybody's not paying attention, or you're being annoying, I think it's really important to repeat anyway and say, hey, guess what? This is how we learn. So we're learning together. So when you show me your learning, I'll stop.
I'm going to write that down. You're learning. I'll stop. That's good. Some other things that I've used, and that others in Jewish Renewal specifically have used a lot, and some of you may have as well, is call and response. There's some obvious things built into our tradition, but you can use call and response in a lot of ways. And you can actually sometimes, instead of teaching people and doing the repetition, you can literally just have them repeat after you. Singable English translations. I'm sure some of you use things that have already been composed, and some of you probably like I do compose your own. Also through interpretive English, where we actually can be, this isn't so much music, but because it's in the vehicle of music, people can really hear and take in teachings differently than they might otherwise. So if we're actually bringing a kavana or a drash into our English lyrics, it can be a wonderful teaching tool. Another thing is to take our actual Jewish traditional melodies and use them sometimes in other situations than they were originally designed for. So one of the things that I like to do is I teach 6th and 7th graders once a week, and I don't have all that much time with them. I'm also supposed to teach them all individually. And so one of the things that I do as a quiet down technique with them is I teach them trope, it's a few of the more common trope melodies as a nigun. So in class, when they're getting rowdy, I'll say, yeah, da 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 da, you know, and then gradually over the year I add more and more. So by the spring, like they actually all know et nafta and sof pasuk and katon, at least enough to sing along with it. And then when they start working with me, they're like, oh, when they start that individual work. Or if they started with me earlier, they're like sitting back there feeling very smug that they already know what it is. You can also give, if you're, you can use the melodies of Nusach, you know, if you're just giving page numbers or telling people to stand up or sit down, you can sometimes actually stay in the groove. And I actually have a renewal colleague, Chazan Steve Klaper, who created some Nusach nigunim that he just teaches people these nigunim that are in Nusach. So he's not saying that's what we're doing. They just think it's a nigun, but then they're learning the Nusach through that. And since he works in an interfaith setting, that I think has been very powerful for him. So let's do some more crowdsourcing. What else do people do that they find, there it is, that they find helps teach things without teaching? You can just unmute yourself and speak. Anybody have other ideas?
While we're waiting for people to unmute themselves, can I ask their 2 Florida numbers? One ends in 6295. Who is that?
Jan Court.
I'm sorry, who? I couldn't hear. And the other one is 7024. Who is that?
That's me, Elaine Shapiro.
Hi, Elaine.
Hi.
All right, I just wanted to identify everybody so we know who's talking.
And the other one, it was Jan Court.
Oh, thank you very much.
Thanks.
Okay, I apologize. I'll go back on mute and you guys can answer.
How do you do mute?
There's a little button in the lower left-hand corner of your screen, a little microphone.
Okay, I'm not on the screen. I'm just on the phone.
Oh,
yeah.
Then whatever you use to mute your phone.
I don't know. Okay.
Okay. I'll see if I can come up with it. That's okay.
It's okay. As long as you're not in a noisy place, it'll be all right.
Yeah.
Abby, this is not a technique that I want to share, but I did want to give some feedback about when I've tried. I love the idea of maybe singing a page number so that you can flow from one prayer into another. But I found almost universally whenever I did it that people sort of chuckled as if it were funny. And so I stopped doing it. And I'm wondering if maybe I need to tell people at the beginning of the session or at the beginning of the service that we'll be doing that, or if there's some other way that I can get them to feel comfortable with that musical continuity.
Do you have the flexibility to do something like sing the page number, page 35? And I know some people are finding this a little funny, but it keeps us together in our musical group. You know, can you actually give them a little more so they start to understand and maybe get them to sing along with you?
I could certainly try that. I have some flexibility. You know, in a worship situation, I might not want to interrupt the flow of worship. So perhaps
at the beginning,
when we're explaining, you know, how to use the Siddur for people that are visiting, that might be a time for me to say something.
Yeah. You could say we're going to try it as an experiment today, and see how it goes.
When I've sat in a room with a group of cantors, song leaders, etc., and that's been what the leaders were doing, it was beautiful. I loved it.
The other thing is to have plants.
Okay.
It really helps to have a few people that you can get, you know, kind of to be there with you. That's not as easy when you're trying to get people not to laugh. It's harder to model not laughing than it is to have people who can like join in with you. But if you were to do something like that at the beginning and do a little, you know, a little riff and invite people to join you on your riff, if you have a few people who are actually ready to do that, then it'll embolden other people and, you know, make it exactly what I think it was you who said before about bringing people into community with singing. Sorry, I just realized I'm doing that bad thing where I have all of you on the bottom of my screen, so I'm looking down, and then it's like nobody. I realized I was looking down in my camera when I should be looking up.
If I may interject, I think that the singing of the pages, well, I've had that experience where people chuckle at the beginning, but then after you do it a few times, they get used to it, and then they start to take it in and feel it. It's that discomfort at the beginning of, you know, something new, and they think it's somehow silly, but then they realize, oh, this actually, it works, and they can get into the flow of it.
Yeah, and it's also true that, you know, different groups are different, and you'll have to see how it goes with who you have.
Thank you.
Yeah, that's very true. My husband, for one, hates singing page numbers.
Right.
He's totally against that practice. So when he's around, I kind of try to avoid it.
Quick question. When you're singing, what melody do you use for singing the page numbers?
Whatever I'm either coming out of or going into.
Okay, that's what I was thinking. So like if you're going to do Adon Alone, you would sing the page numbers to the melody of Adon Alone.
You could do that.
You could.
Yes, because you would, before that you would have been doing the Kaddish, so you wouldn't have been singing. So
right. Well, for example, this comes up a lot because, for example, in Mishkan Tefillah, the Givorot doesn't follow the Avot on the opposite page. So you say Magen Avraham Bezrat Soda, page 166, Atagi Bor Le'olama. You know, so you kind of, you know, so people know. I just made up 166, but so people know you're using the same melody, the melody you just finished singing, leading right into the next thing. And that's an example. I sing that every time. I have to do because if I'm using Mishkan Tefillah, for example, I have to sing that every time because it doesn't follow directly. People need to know to switch to the page next.
Right. So you like the exit melody better than the next prayer, the entering melody?
I do whatever comes naturally.
Okay. So either one would work, depends on the situation.
I think it would depend on the situation. As I said with Adon Olam, if you're not having anything before, and there's no exit melody to use. So you could, you could announce the melody for Adon Olam by, saying, we're going to page 605 and we'll sing together,
Okay, thank you.
or
Yeah,
something.
this was helpful.
Yeah. Other techniques that people want to bring up for suggestions or questions?
Another thing that I've seen done, I haven't really done it myself, but is to use the same nusach for whatever tefillah is being done in Hebrew and switch to the English, and using the same, the same nusach, the same melody, tune for the English.
Yes.
I've also done something very similar in a family service where I chanted the Haftarah, and then I actually chanted it using the trope melodies in English. So it took a bit of preparation to, figure that out, but it was really cool for a family service because they could hear it and understand it with the melody.
Yeah, I actually, I posted this on the list, but I have done a bunch of that myself, and worked with Rabbi Arthur Waskow to select passages from Martin Luther King Jr.'s non-Vietnam speech and set them to Haftarah trope. And that's what I will be chanting this Shabbat morning for the Haftarah.
Wow.
Because today is the 50th anniversary of that speech.
Right.
So, yeah, it can be very powerful.
Is that something you'd be willing to share?
Oh, yeah, I did share it on the listserv, and I can share it again.
I'll look for it. Thank you.
It's also on Ritual Well, but I will actually look up I can put it right here on the.
Also, Jack Kessler is a master of this technique, and he's a great resource for this, for those who are interested in it as well.
Okay, let me put it on it's right here. There you go. Can people see that?
Yes.
Yeah. Another thing that I have thought about is how to model Jewish values and midot through the way that I sing in any given time. Sometimes that might just be something I'm aware of, but I have thought about actually saying it out loud. This is an idea that I'm developing, is like, how can we actually model the midah or the value through the way that we sing when we're talking about it. So obviously, it's easy to model zeal. For anava, I had this wonderful experience in the fall where I was doing a service with the Bet Gimel students, and they were, I often will say, drown me out, or you make it so I don't have to sing, but it actually worked. They actually, I taught them Debbie's Light These Lights, and they actually took it on as their own. So partly was the luck of the group that they actually did that. And I was able to pretty much just drop out and play guitar and have them sing to their parents, which I really loved.
Excuse me 1 minute, because I have to leave. I just want to thank you. I'm sorry I can't
Oh,
stay
you're
for the
welcome.
whole program.
You can listen to the recording.
Okay, thank you so much.
Thanks, Gail.
Bye, Gail.
You're welcome. Bye.
So if they were a little older, I might actually say something to them. Second and third graders, I think the idea of humility is perhaps a little bit, that would be, that would have to be a whole discussion. But that's an idea that I've had that I hope that all of us together can work on and develop. So there's also sometimes when there's also a wonderful nigun called the Benoni nigun, which I don't know if how many of you are familiar with. I learned it from Reb Zalman of blessed memory, and the nigun is actually it's uses through the melody. It's actually talking about the teaching of the nigun. So the Benoni is like in between. I'm going to play it, yeah. I'm just getting my iTunes up. Benoni is the in between, not the tzaddik and not the rasha. And it's not an easy nigun to learn. Whoops, that's the wrong one. Sorry, I should have had this queued up. Here it is. Can you guys hear this or not? Somebody has a lot of noise in their environment. If they can mute, could people hear that melody that I started on or not?
No, I did not hear it.
Okay, so I'm going to take my headset off so I can.
Hai nararai, ha mam 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 mam, oh da 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 di da da. Hai nararai, hai nai nam. I naravai, I nayanam, I naravai, I nayanam, narariram, I narariram, ya ya ya.
Okay, I'm going to put my headset back on.
And I'm not suggesting that that's easily a nigun that's easily done in many settings, but I feel like the teaching there is pretty amazing for us as leaders, and also to be thinking about how do we craft things that teach in that way. Some other ways that we can use music as a stealth teaching tool is bringing in accessible melodies from diverse traditions to teach more about Jewish diversity, and be open to discovering new things in the pieces that you're very familiar with, and think about how you can bring more into each into something that you've done many times. Somebody else is having a lot of noise coming in, so I don't know if we can, Robbie, maybe we can just mute can you mute everybody?
Yeah, it's Jan. I know that you're on the phone, so it's I see the screen turns green when it's the
okay.
So yeah, Jan, I'm going to mute you.
Thanks.
There's a way of raising your hand, but yeah. So
thanks. Another thing that somebody brought up, Jack Kessler, who's my teacher, and something that he emphasized often to us is to remember that silence is as important as sound. And sometimes a pause can be just as important, and can be a teaching tool in itself, a way for us to convey meaning through pause and silence.
Abby?
Yeah.
Marlene, it's Hanser. How are you? And thank you for doing this. And I have a question.
Yeah.
What do you mean by that when you say pause? Can you give me an example of what he means?
Well, so it could be just as simple as do di li va ani lo. There's a little silence in there. That there's a little. So that's one thing. Is that if it doesn't have the same feeling if you go do di li va ani lo. So sometimes just literally rests in the music can make a difference, but there can also be well, if any of you are familiar with Rabbi Shefa Gold's work, where she teaches a lot of chanting, and a lot of us will use something like Elohai Neshama, and it's very familiar. But if you attend a session with her, one of the things that she feels the chant, the whole purpose of the chant is to come to the silence at the end. And sometimes being able to hold that silence can help people. Somebody talked before about bringing people into community with singing at the beginning, and sometimes if that singing can lead into silence, that can also bring people into a community and into themselves in a different way. Also, just, you know, as singers, you know, if you're singing a piece, you know, say the end of Lecha Dodi. I'll use like a pretty familiar melody. Boi v'shalom materet bala, gam b'simcha u'v'tzola, toch emunei am segula. Boi chala, boi chala. So what I'm trying to create is that spaciousness through that pause. Does that make sense?
Yeah, I think when you say pause, that really makes sense because many times I will do that. But when you said silence, I wasn't sure how long and what you meant by silence. I think the pause gives you a time to breathe and everyone kind of is with you. You draw people in that way, I think, so that when you come back, you know, you're ready. Thank you for clearing that up.
Sure. I mean, I think that depending again on who you're with and what the context is, sometimes a longer silence can be useful. And you know, again, if people aren't used to it, they may be uncomfortable.
Right.
But that doesn't mean that we shouldn't keep doing it and bringing it in. And in some cases, you know, starting with less and developing that. If that's something that we're trying to teach about entering silence and being okay to be in silence and letting sound resound through the silence.
I also feel that we need to interpret what we're doing so that you're not just singing one thing after another and, you know, whatever. You're really thinking of what you're saying. You're giving interpretation to it. You can pause, and it's like an actor on a stage compared to just singing a song. There's such a difference. And I think in that way, it makes it more interesting. It's so important, and it really draws people in. Many times people are speakers and they're not singers, or they're singers, and when they go to speak, they can't do the same thing. They're not used to doing the same thing in their speaking as they are in their singing. And you can do it the other way around. So I do agree with that. I think it's more interesting, and it just draws a line between someone who's just speaking one thing after another and not interpreting it in his or her way.
Yeah. Any other thoughts, comments, questions, suggestions?
Just to build on Marlene's comment, I love giving context to a prayer or a melody or a moment in the service. And there is a rabbi that I've worked with in the past who basically said, this is not a teaching service. I don't want, you know, I just want it to flow. And I really feel strongly that people can often use a little nudge to think about a prayer or a prayer moment or a melody or a singing moment in a different way. So they might have been singing this melody all their lives, but at this moment they're going to think about it in a new way. And I really like giving context to something.
Yeah, and so I guess what I'm saying is that in addition to doing that with words, you can also convey some of that through the way that you are doing the singing. and leading singing, if it is something that people are familiar with, you can still at least have the intention to speed it up or slow it down or phrase something to bring some of that out. That's not on the intellectual level. And there's also people can get a lot out of a kavanah that it does address a more intellectual teaching moment. But there's ways to do all these things that still keep the flow of the service.
Good
and
point.
I think it has a lot to do with how you hold the space, how you transition in and out of different things. But yes, it's very possible to like get into that, like, and now I'm going to tell you about this, and now I'm going to tell you about that, and that does interrupt the flow. But how can you convey those things, whether you're doing it literally in words or in the way that you evoke the music, to keep that flow going? That said, I don't know if anybody noticed, I said, have the intention to do something, because I'm sure you've all had the experience of like, I'm going to do this new melody and I think this is going to be really cool. And then everybody's just doing the same old melody that they know, and they kind of take it over, and you just have to be with the people doing that. I know I've had that experience with Alenu, trying to do it in, appropriate nusach for a particular day, and it just wasn't happening. Or I think I tried to do something with Alenu at the beginning of Alenu, and everybody just went right into what they were used to, and that was it. Other things that people want to bring up? Just trying to keep an eye on the time. I want to share with you one other thing, and then have a little exercise that we can actually try out doing some of this together. A bunch of years ago, I audited a course on Jewish mysticism at Ithaca College. I'd already graduated long since, and I wrote a paper on the mysticism in the synagogue service, and I was actually studying Elbogen, who has done wrote this very long work on liturgy. And I'll just read you this quote from my paper about another kind of stealth teaching. In addition to Ha'aderet v'Ha'emuna, other prayers in the Psuke de Zimra, the second preparatory section that precedes the morning service, such as Baruch She'amar, Nishmat Kol Chai, and Yishtabach through Shochenad, have passages that echo the repetitive trance-inducing quality of the Merkava hymns. So I don't know if you all know that Ha'aderet v'Ha'emuna is actually from the Merkava mystical text. It is literally from those texts. So that when the worshiper comes to the Kedusha of Yotzer in the second blessing of the Shema sequence, he or she is potentially in a state ripe for an ecstatic mystical prayer experience. If, as Elbogen maintains, the Kedusha was interposed into the liturgy by the Merkava mystics, this was a stealthy, even subversive way of giving everyone the opportunity for a taste of mystical experience without the dangers of or extensive knowledge needed for serious mystical practice. So for those of you who are interested in mystical experiences, we can do this ourselves through some of the melodies that we use and the way that we, and repetition. I think Robbie brought that up, or somebody brought that up as a repetition to help people learn. Repetition can also be a way to help people get into a deeper state. So what I want to have people do is each person who wants to participate in this exercise identify a phrase of melody or text that you want to use. We could all use the same one. We could all use different ones. It doesn't really matter. And identify what you want to convey. And think about some ways that you might do this. And then anyone who's feeling brave can actually say what they're thinking and then make an attempt. And this is not about like getting it right. It's about allowing each other the space to practice.
I have a great idea. It's Marlena again.
Yeah.
Would you start?
Would I start?
Please.
Sure.
I'd like to know what you're thinking of, and then we can go from there.
And we should use. I think we should use the same piece. We should just do one piece.
One piece.
Time,
Okay.
but also so we can learn from that one piece together. We can
Sure.
build our own covenant.
Sure. Does anybody have a proposed shtickle of text or melody? Something that you feel like has been gotten kind of stale that you'd like to liven up?
How about Oh say shalom bimrama, say shalom. I mean, everybody knows it.
Yep. Sure.
Mm-hmm.
Yeah. So, we'll just I think take the just those 3 words. Oseh shalom bimrama. It's not like we couldn't do it for a longer text, but some of what is useful in this is actually to really drill down into something smaller and in that more detailed level. So if I wanted to convey, okay, so one obvious thing could be we're talking about peace. So if I want to convey that in a peaceful way, I might do it. I might see, like, how can I embody that? Well, I might decide to, I could do some things deliberately, like I could say, I'm going to do it more slowly. But maybe I want to convey that peace can also be joyful and active. So maybe I don't want to do it more slowly. Say there's been a really hectic event in the world, then I probably am going to want to have a more, like when I did Min HaMeitzar at the beginning, some people said it was somber, even though that was not actually what I was going for. I was going for meditative. But certainly if there's been a very distressing event in the world or in the community, maybe somber and a little sad is a way of evoking that. So in that case, I might sing, "O se shalom bimromav." Now, if I start singing that and I'm expecting everybody to join in, that's not going to work for that particular thing. And I actually, when I talked to Set Ohala, there was somebody who did talk about using this exact, I think it was Oseh Shalom. It was something that normally people would join in on. And she actually told them to listen and to use it as a meditation. And she did the singing in this evocative way, and it was very powerful because it was allowing people to have the familiarity, but not have to go into, but to stay in a deeper place. So that's one possibility.
I have a question, Abby.
Yeah.
And again, we're just a few minutes away from ending the session, and
Yeah.
thank you in a moment. My question is, you said if you were to start out, oh, say, of just nice and slow.
Yeah.
Why do you think that wouldn't work? You said that wouldn't work for people jumping.
Oh, I said if I didn't cue them, they would probably go at the pace they were used to.
Right.
I'm not saying it wouldn't work. I'm saying if I was trying to evoke that and I just did it out of the blue, that's more what I meant.
Right. Okay. I guess it depends on your audience too.
That's also true.
On who's listening, and if it's kids who are used to doing a more excitable camper or something.
Yeah.
So, okay.
I think so many of us do it during services, whatever the mood is, whatever is happening, whether something has happened that was a tragedy, and then we would go into something very soft, or Debbie's "Oh se shalom" when something is happy, or Adon Olam 15 million ways. However the mood is, we have so many things to draw on. And it's always wonderful. Even high holidays, which Adon Olam, which Oseh Shalom, and I think the congregation kind of waits to see, well, which one are you going to do? And then if it's somebody's been killed, a tragedy or whatever, there are so many, and that's the beauty of our tradition.
Yes, and I guess what I'm saying is that you can take any one of those melodies and bring a different quality to it. I could say I want to do Debbie's Oseh Shalom, but it's been this horrible thing has happened, so I'm going to say Oseh Shalom Bimroma, and use that pause and stuff like so. I could do that. Believe me, I'm a melody, lover, and I'd love to have more and more and more melodies. But I also want to try and expand my range, so that it's not tied to a specific melody. Does anybody want to try a different, using that same standard Oseh Shalom melody? Is it Nurit Hirsch? I can't remember. Yeah. Yes. Nurit Hirsch, that first phrase of Nurit Hirsch, with a totally different mood or intention. Or you guys want me to do it?
I can certainly talk to you about a couple of different ways that we approach it. One of the things I typically do is come out of silent prayer, and I start a cappella very slowly with a lot of space, a lot of breath, a lot of silence. And they'll sing along, but they also follow me. So it's not like they take it over and take it to a different place.
Can you do it for us right now?
Sure. But then what I do is then I bring in the guitar and I build it up so that we do get to that clapping happy place.
Right.
So I might start off, Oseh Shalom Bimroma.
Nice.
Yaseh Shalom Aleinu, etc. So really focusing on the meaning of the words, the breath, the space.
Yeah.
And then maybe in the next part, the guitar comes in on some quiet arpeggios, and then it builds and it gets a little faster, and people start clapping. Yep. And so we bring them into community and into a certain sense of spirit.
Beautiful. Beautiful. What about if you wanted to start in that joyful place?
I'm thinking of, for example, with our Simchat Torah band or our Tefillah band, we might just go flat out into the rhythm, the clapping, the dancing, with that same melody, and just use it differently.
Yeah. And what if you want to bring it into that joyful space and you don't have the band? Oseh Shalom Bimroma. You can do it with your voice.
Oh, sure. Sure.
Yeah. Other moods that we might want to bring to that melody.
And I think this will be have to be our
This
last
will be ours.
one.
Oh,
Yeah, because
well, yes, you're right. We're at time. So
Sure.
let's instead end with for our teachers, because I think that's also a beautiful example of stealth teaching, where Debbie actually brought the reform movement into relationship with Kaddish Rabbanan.
Mm-hmm. Beautiful. And before you sing that, with your beautiful voice and your incredible eyes and your gorgeous kippah and your whole thing about you just glowing and beautiful. And I just want to thank you so very much for leading off our Nasha knowledge. And I
absolutely
can't wait to learn more from you. I hope you'll be in Cleveland. Are you coming to Cleveland?
I'm hoping to come to Cleveland. I have a big job that came up unexpectedly, so I don't know, but I'm hoping to come.
I hope that you can be there, because what a gift you gave us this morning. Thank you. And for those who are listening in and are on, we have sessions every Wednesday at the same time all the way through May, which is pretty exciting. And lots of incredibly talented people are offering their gifts to us, like Abbe did this morning. So just want to say thank you to you, Abbe, so much. And can't wait to hear how we're going to close with Kaddish Rabbanan.
Thank you, Abbe.
Thanks. For our teachers and the students, please join me. And the students
of the students,
we ask to study Torah here and everywhere. May they be blessed with all they need, and let us say amen. We ask for peace and loving kindness, and let us say amen. We ask for peace and loving kindness, and let us say amen. Thank you, everyone.
Beautiful. Thank you so much, everybody. Enjoy the rest of their Pesach, and look forward to seeing you online again next Wednesday at the same time. Thank you. And thank you.
Bye, everybody.
Bye.
Thank you, Abby.
You're
Thank
welcome.
you.